Some words can lower your IELTS writing score because they're just too informal. When you're writing for IELTS, you need to use a formal tone. So in this lesson, I'm going to show you more than 40 words you should avoid in IELTS writing, which may reduce your band score, which band 7 plus formal words you can use instead, and we're going to look at real example sentences for IELTS writing so you can understand how to use the words. Now, before we start, if you want to band 7 in IELTS, make sure you check out our complete step-by-step preparation course, and the link is in the description below. All right, let's get started with the first set of words. Let's start with the most common words students use, which are just too informal. The first one is you and your. This is one of the most common ones I see in writing task 2 essays, and you shouldn't be using it for two main reasons. The first one is it's just too informal. It sounds very casual. Now, please note that it's okay to use you and your for writing task 1 general training if you're writing to a friend, because that's a very casual and informal situation. However, for writing task 2, which is an essay, you should not be using you and your. Now, apart from that, you should also remember that you're not talking to the reader. You're talking in general, so you shouldn't be saying you and your. So what should you use instead? Well, you should use the most precise word for whatever you're talking about. So that means you need to use the best word in that situation to describe what you're talking about. So have a look at this sentence. If you don't rely on a car for public transport, it will reduce the number of vehicles on the road. Well, think about, who are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about commuters, and commuters are people who travel to a place and then back, normally to work or study. So we could say, if commuters don't rely on a car for transport, ... Here's another example. You can see that the vast majority of young people are addicted to social media platforms. Well, again, you're not specifically talking to the reader, so instead you could say something like, it can be seen that the vast majority of ... So this is a passive voice sentence, so this is going to help to boost your grammar score as well. All right, so the next one is so. So is mainly used in speaking and shouldn't be used in academic writing. So what can you use instead? Well, it depends on what you're trying to say, but you could say because of this, ... or alternatively, you could say which means that, ... So here's an example. Many children are growing up in digital environments, so their attention spans are significantly shorter. Well, instead of saying that, you could say because of this. Many children are growing up, ... because of this, their attention spans are shorter. Here's another one. The population is aging, so healthcare systems will face more pressure. Well, again, we could use something else. The population is aging, which means that ... and then you give more information. Number 3 is a lot of. This is a very informal phrase, so it shouldn't be used in writing. Instead, you can say many, a large number of, or a significant amount of. For example, a lot of money is spent on space research every year. Or instead, you could say a significant amount of money is spent. That is much more professional than just saying a lot of. Number 4 is a couple of or a few, and these are the opposite of many, and these are also too informal for IELTS writing, so instead you can use phrases or words like several or a limited number of. There are only a few jobs available in rural areas, which often leads to urban migration. Well, no, that's too informal. We could say there are only a limited number of jobs available in rural areas. This is more professional and more academic and formal. Number 5 is I think. Now, there's nothing really wrong with this one, but you can make it much better by using a passive voice or using higher level vocabulary. So you could say something like, it can be argued that, or you could say, I am of the opinion that, and then you say what you think, you give your opinion. So here's an example. I think that employers should prioritize educational qualifications when hiring. Well, let's make that better and more professional. I am of the opinion that employers should prioritize educational. The next word is things or stuff when you're talking about something in general. Again, this is very informal. So instead of saying things or stuff, you need to use the specific noun in that situation or the best word to describe that thing in that situation. So let's have a look at two examples. One of the most important things in education is good teaching. No. One of the most important aspects of education is good teaching. Let's look at one more. Young people spend excessive amounts of money on stuff they don't need. No, too informal. Young people spend excessive amounts of money on material possessions. This is the more precise piece of vocabulary here. The next one is an idiom, in a nutshell. A lot of students use this one to start their conclusion paragraph. So in a nutshell means in a short and simple way. But it's very informal, so instead of saying in a nutshell, you can simply say in conclusion. That's it. Just say in conclusion, then you need a comma, and then you can start writing your conclusion. So here's an example. In a nutshell, traffic congestion is a major issue in many capital cities all over the world. Well, no, that's too informal. In conclusion, traffic congestion is a major issue. All right, let's move on to the next type of vocabulary that you should not be using, which is shortened forms. So you might be thinking, what is a shortened form? Well, what I mean by that is, have a look at this word here, phone. Well, this is the shortened form of telephone. For IELTS writing, you need to write the full word. Let's have a look at some more examples. The next one is fridge. Well, that's the shortened form of refrigerator. The next one is ad. That's short for advertisement. The next one is gym. That's short for gymnasium. Flu, that's short for influenza, when you get really sick. Exam, that's short for examination. The next one is uni, that's short for university. The next one is math, that's short for mathematics. The next one is lab, that's short for laboratory. Finally, the last one is spec, that is short for specification. Now, please note that you can say the shortened forms in IELTS speaking, but for IELTS writing, you should be writing the full words. The next type of vocabulary you should avoid is idioms. But what are idioms? Well, they are phrases that have a meaning different from the individual words in them. They are used in everyday English to make speech more natural and interesting. Now, I'm going to show you 5 common idioms that students like to use in writing and what you can use instead. The first one is a double-edged sword. This one means something that has both positive and negative effects. So here's an example. Technology is a double-edged sword. Although it improves communication, it also reduces face-to-face interactions. So this is not correct for formal writing. Instead, you could say something like, technology has both positive and negative effects, although it... All right, the next one is a step in the right direction. This idiom means a small but positive action that moves you or something towards a goal. So here's an example. Investing in renewable energy is a step in the right direction for combating or fighting climate change. Well, no, that's too informal. Investing in renewable energy is a positive move towards combating climate change. This is more professional. All right, number 3, the third idiom is the tip of the iceberg. This means a small, visible part of a much bigger problem. So we're talking about a small part of a much bigger issue. Here is an example. Rising obesity rates are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to public health issues. So this is saying that rising obesity rates, yes, they're a problem, but they're just a small problem. There are other bigger issues. So instead of that, you could say rising obesity rates are only one small part of much larger public health issues. The next one is every coin has two sides. This one simply means every situation has both advantages and disadvantages. So, every situation has both good things and bad things. Here's an example. Some argue that online learning is convenient, but every coin has two sides and it may reduce student engagement. Okay, fair enough. We're saying that there are good things and bad things, but that's too informal. Some argue that online learning is convenient, but it also has disadvantages. So you can see here that it's very simple to put this into more formal English. We simply say a good thing, and then we say, but it also has. And then we talk about a negative or negatives in the plural. Okay, the fifth and final idiom is at the end of the day. This means when everything is considered, when you think about everything. Here is an example. At the end of the day, government policies should prioritize long-term sustainability. Note that's too informal. Instead of that, we can use a very professional word, ultimately. This has the same meaning when all things are considered or thought about. Government policies should... So try not to use idioms in formal writing. They are more suitable for speaking. The next type of words that you should avoid are slang words. But what does slang mean? What is a slang word? Well, slang refers to very informal words or expressions that are often used in very casual speech. These words are not usually appropriate for formal writing, especially in IELTS essays. So now I'm going to show you 5 slang words I've seen students use in writing task 2 essays. The first one is guys. This is a very informal word which just means a group of people. So instead of saying guys, you can say people, individuals, or the public, depending on what you're trying to say. So here's an example. Many guys believe that education should be free for everyone. No, too informal. Simply say many people believe that. The next one is messed up, and this means to do something badly or to make a serious mistake. So instead of saying messed up, you should say something like made a mistake, handled poorly, or mismanaged. Governments have really messed up the response to the crisis. No good. Too informal. Governments have handled the response to the crisis very poorly. Yes, much better, more professional. The next one is big deal, which means something very important or significant. So instead of saying big deal, you can say something like major issue, serious concern, or important matter. Pollution is a big deal in many cities around the world. No good. Pollution is a serious concern in many urban areas across the globe. Yes, much better, more professional. The next one is totally, which just means completely or fully. So instead of saying totally, you can say completely, entirely, or strongly. For example, I totally agree that students should be encouraged to study abroad. Well, this is great. You're trying to give your opinion. However, it's too informal, the word totally. Instead, you can use the word strongly. I strongly agree that students should be encouraged. All right, the last one for slang words is cool, which is a very informal way to say something is good or impressive. So instead of saying cool, you could say useful, beneficial, or effective, depending on the context. For example, I think it's really cool that companies are offering flexible working hours now. Well, no, cool is too informal. Companies offering flexible working hours is extremely beneficial to employees. This is much more professional. And note here with this one, how you don't always have to replace the word with another word in exactly the same place. You'll see that with the second sentence here, we have changed the sentence. We have put that adjective, beneficial, at the end of the sentence instead of at the start. The next type of words you should not use are basic words. Why? Well, to get a high band score in IELTS vocabulary, you need to use some less common vocabulary. So the first basic word I see students using all the time is good. Instead of using good, there are so many alternatives you can use, including beneficial, effective, and advantageous. So here's an example. Online learning is good for students who live in remote areas. No good. This is too basic if you want a higher band score. Online learning is beneficial for students who live in remote areas. This is much better, much more professional. The next one I hear all the time is the opposite of good, bad. So instead of saying bad, you can try using words like harmful, ineffective, or problematic. Here is an example. Air pollution is bad for people's health. Well, no, this is too basic, this word bad. So instead, we can use a more precise word or a better word choice in this situation and say air pollution is harmful to people's health. The problem with words like good and bad is that they're too general. But if you use something like the word harmful, that's more specific and it's a better fit, or it just describes the situation much better in this sentence. The next one is give. So instead of saying give, you can say something like provide, offer, or deliver. Here is an example. The government should give financial support to the unemployed. No, too basic. Let's use the more precise word in this situation. The government should provide financial support to the unemployed. Next up, we have get. Well, instead of saying get, you can say receive, obtain, or gain. Here's an example. Students can get valuable life experience from studying abroad. Well, that's okay, but the word get is too basic. Let's change it to a more professional word. Students can gain valuable life experience from studying abroad. Moving on to number 5, which is do. This is a very common one that a lot of students use in more general situations. Or instead, you could say carry out, conduct, or perform, depending on the sentence, of course. Here's an example. Researchers should do more studies on climate change. Well, that's too basic. Let's use a better word. Researchers should conduct more studies on climate change. This is a more professional word in this context. Another type of word you should avoid is contractions. Now, what are contractions? Well, contractions are shorter ways to say two or more than two words together, like saying don't instead of do not. So here's another example, saying can't instead of cannot. So let me show you 10 more examples of contractions that you should not use in IELTS writing, because contractions are a bit informal and they're more suitable for spoken language rather than written. The next one is won't instead of will not. Next, we've got it's instead of it is or it has, depending on what you're saying. The next one is isn't instead of is not. Next, we've got doesn't instead of does not. I'm instead of I am. There instead of they are. I'd instead of I would. Mustn't instead of must not. And finally, could've instead of could have. Now, let me give you one more final tip. Another thing you can do to improve your writing score is to learn higher level vocabulary. So if you want to learn some band 7+ words you can use in IELTS Writing Task 2, check out this video right here. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. Take care and see you next time.